Man, we are getting down to the nitty-gritty. We are just over 2 weeks from the early signing period, the December signing period, whatever we're calling it. And how interesting are things getting, Hank? Because
very, very
we're
interesting.
A lot about guys on Flip Watch both ways.
Yeah. It's there's a ton going on. And it kind of, obviously this is the time of year where things start happening. You see, especially in the NIL era, schools that maybe weren't making a lot of noise are starting to, put their last offers on the table for kids, get them thinking. Schools are popping up out of nowhere to flip kids. So yeah, and with Texas, it's very interesting. This past weekend, I think, is the first time it's really been illuminated, I guess, a little bit more in the fact that there's other schools that want these Texas commits. We saw three guys committed to Texas visit Florida this past weekend. Biggest being Jamie French, the 5-star wide receiver. He took an official visit to Florida. And then Myron Charles, who, equally as important of a commit, big-time defensive tackle. And then Zalis Hicks, the safety commitment that just reclassified. We saw Nick Townsend show up to Texas A&M. Not a huge shock. They're making a big push for him late. I think they're upping the ante on him or trying to. We saw Josiah Sharma visit BYU. I want to say they're not a huge threat, but, Mormon's BYU money, I don't know. Maybe they make a late push for him. And then who else? Who else did we have last weekend? Lance Jackson visited Arkansas. I mean, he's going to see his brother play. I'm not worried about Lance Jackson. And I think that was it. If I'm counting everybody, yeah, that's 6. There were 6 visits elsewhere. So yeah, I think the biggest, Jamie French is who we're kind of watching close. Is Myron Charles, I think, is one to watch close. Florida obviously is getting this buzz. They had the big win over LSU. They have another big home game this weekend. Billy Napier is safe for another year. So, they're trying to rally around DJ Lagway and kind of build out this roster and get him some more help. So, a guy like Jimmy French is someone you could do that with if, you can get everything in order there and, the NIL is all there and all that. So, we've been checking in with sources, trying to talk, getting thoughts from the kids themselves and all that. And it's kind of hard to say, I've heard, there's confidence that Jamie French sticks with Texas. If you go look at the Florida side, there's a lot of buzz that he could end up staying in state and going to Florida. Myron Charles, there's, again, Texas has put in a lot of work there. They're still putting in work there. There's confidence he sticks, but, we saw DeAndre Robinson flip to Florida last year after Bo Davis left to go to LSU. It's still 2 weeks it's not a lot of time, but there's a lot of stuff that could still change here in the next 2 weeks. So it's kind of just, keep your head on a swivel, continue to recruit these guys like they're not committed. But on the flip side, it does, like you said, it goes both ways. One big development for this weekend is Michael Fusi, the 5-star offensive tackle that's committed to Oklahoma, is going to visit Texas on Saturday for the Kentucky game. So that's huge news. He's an Oklahoma commit. They're not, typically allowed to take visits once they commit. I don't think Brent Venables looks favorably upon that. I think I just saw an interview he gave that said, if you're visiting elsewhere as a commit, you're not committed. So, I think that might've been a subtle, maybe not so subtle shot at Michael Fusi. But again, I feel like you're trying to keep your head above water. If you're Brent Venables, it's like you're probably going to have to let your guys take visits if you want to try to hang on to them. Can't just drop them. So we'll see. That'll be a telling visit. But Texas is still working on finishing out this defensive class, defensive line. Obviously hanging on to the guys they have committed, defensive line. The linebacker spot, and then defensive back obviously last week as well with Grayson Littleton joining the fold. So. Yeah, a lot of moving parts, and it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together.
Yeah, Hank, a lot of people forget Kelvin Banks before he came to Texas. He was once committed to Oklahoma State and once committed to Oregon, and then he ended up on the 40 acres. So when you hear these big-time 5-star offensive tackles that could flip he's the first one that a lot of these Texas fans, comes to mind. Talk about Fusi and what he brings to the table, because I feel like offensive linemen, you like these big guys, but usually when they play, they're just in high school, they're just so much bigger than their opponent. So it's so easy to move guys, and then it takes them a little longer to figure it out once they get on campus. Talk about Fusi. Do you see him as a guy that could potentially be a first-year player like Kelvin Banks was, or does he need time to develop?
I think he could. The thing is, he's really young. I think he's only, I don't even know if he's 17 yet or 8. I think he's very young, but he has a soccer background as well. I believe. Maybe I'm thinking Lamont Rogers, but he's dual sport athlete. I think he's the number one offensive line. Let me pull up his profile. He's number one offensive tackle in the state, I believe. But he just kind of matches or fits the Kyle Flood bill. They like size, big bodies, big humans, but without sacrificing athleticism. That's exactly what he is. I mean, he's 6'5", 295. Good feet, good specs. I'm looking at his 24/7 page. We have him as the number 3 offensive tackle in the country per 24/7 Sports. But yeah, I'm trying to look at him. He grew up playing soccer. I don't know why because I know Lamont Rogers plays soccer too. I don't know why I started second guessing that, but obviously that dual sport background kind of shows his athleticism and how that can translate to different sports. But I know the one knock on him is, and Gabe wrote this, is he's like a bit high cut physically, but has above average bend. So you can go look at a 24/7 page to get his full eval. But he's the one guy. Texas has 5 offensive linemen committed, and I think he's the only one they would make an exception for and take 6. Lamont Rogers maybe 2, but he's a special type player. They consider him in that elite category. So I certainly think he could probably play early, depending on what the offensive line turnover is. I guess this offseason, whether does Cam Williams come back or does he go to the NFL? What's that look like? Obviously, Kelvin Banks is gonna go. So that'll be an opening. But you got Brandon Baker, another 5-star tackle from last year's signing class, is probably going to step up and fill in. You got young guys on the roster like Guby. So there's going to be opportunities, and I think he probably projects certainly more to offensive tackle, but you never know. If you want to get early playing time, if you can fit in other spots too. But yeah, big time player. And there's a lot of buzz about A&M with him too. So it seems like Oklahoma's really fighting to just keep him committed between Texas and Texas A&M. I think that's really telling. And if you look at it, and I've seen a bunch of OU fans complaining about this, OU is hosting Alabama this weekend. Like that's I know they're not playing for anything anymore outside of pride, but that's a huge home game. And he's coming down to Texas to see them play Kentucky. Not saying that's not a big game, but the school you're committed to hosting a massive SEC game your first year in the SEC versus Texas hosting Kentucky ahead of a bigger game on the road next weekend. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what he says, if he says anything after this visit, or how his recruitment kind of unfolds.
Yeah, and then does he go to the Texas A&M game?
I believe that's the plan. Colin Kennedy reported on that because he posted the visit to Texas, and yeah, that's the plan is go see Texas A&M as well. So obviously as a recruit for Texas A&M, if Texas can go in there and take care of business, that probably helps as well.
Yeah. So we have a question here from Jose. Says, Hank, is there any risk to high school recruit agents embellishing their current deals and shopping them around to get better deals? How does a school combat that other than Scout's honor?
Yeah. This whole business, because the problem is with all this is a lot of this NIL guy, like NIL agents, are like just young kids, like college kids that are like trying to, that don't actually have experience in negotiating anything. Like some of these kids like actually have legitimate representation. Like Jamie French, he just signed, I think, with like Rosenhaus or something. Like, so like he's got like, professional guys. And in Florida, you can have agents, and take advantage of your NIL as a high school athlete. But yeah, I think it runs a risk to the recruit in that, like I just heard, I and I won't like name names, but a kid just decommitted recently because he went to the school he was committed to saying one of the rival schools was offering him, X amount of dollars more. And the school he was committed to was like, okay, go ahead, go take that. And it was like they were just trying to leverage and say it, and the other school wasn't actually offering this. So I think it's just a matter of, like make sure you're, people, you're building relationships with these kids, and like, you're trying to give them the best advice, and that they have the right people in their ear. Otherwise you're going to run into these situations where, trying to get leveraged, and, sometimes that is not the right move. And, you try to play hard to get, and the school, moves on there, especially around portal season. It's like, you want to play that game. Okay, go do what you want to do. We'll go get a kid out of the portal. So it can go both ways. But yeah, kids have to be careful with who they have advising them, because in a lot of cases, they're not in it for the kid. They're in it for themselves. And we're seeing that a lot more and more. So, that could be something that needs to be more regulated here in the next few years.
Well, real quick, what are your thoughts on Guby and Brandon Baker? Because they very well could be Texas's starting offensive tackles next year.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Guby in various situations. Like he came in when Williams went down a couple weeks ago. Again, these athletic kids, like, they're just like functional athletes that, I think there's a lot to like about him. I know you've been, you've written things about, the excitement around, Baker, even Daniel Cruz, potentially replacing Jake Majors next year. So, it seems like they've built a lot of depth, and I'm sure, it'll be interesting to see how, NFL draft decisions, portal decisions, not, speculating on anyone leaving, but, guys will leave. It happens every year, how that line's going to come together next year, and, who's going to fit where. But yeah, I think, really exciting future for him. You got a guy like Baker. If you can get a guy like Fusi, I mean, you just keep the pipeline rolling, and you're in good shape.
Hank, your thoughts on the trip to Arkansas? Obviously, the Horns didn't look as good as they could have, but a win's a win, especially against a rival opponent in the SEC. Your thoughts on the game and where this Horns team is at?
Yeah, again, like you said, a win's a win. I think you look back in the past, 10, 15 years of following Texas football, those are absolutely the kind of games that Texas would drop, in the Charlie Strong, Tom Herman era, where, you just you're not playing how you should. You kind of let the team hang around. You end up getting beat in the fourth quarter. So I think that just kind of goes to show where the program's at health-wise, and that, they were messing around. I mean, I can't fault the defense at all. They were doing their job, but, there missed opportunities and just different things, letting Arkansas stay in the game. So, you look at the stats going into the game, like Quinn should have thrown, 350, 400 yards on this team. Like Arkansas secondary was not good, but then you talk about the three high safety look, was that throwing them off? They couldn't really take any deep shots, but, when he did have guys open, or on a couple of occasions, he just missed them. Go over through, I guess, Golden on that one, and then the Gunnar Helm one. There's opportunities they just didn't take advantage of, and you would expect them to do that. Especially as a third-year starter. I know Chip wrote about it. He came through when he needed to, but it shouldn't have gotten to that point pretty much. But yeah, so they got the win. That's the most important part. You go to the next week if you can handle Kentucky kind of like you handled Florida. I think, nobody's going to be talking about Arkansas this time next week. It'll all be on A&M. But, yeah, I mean, it was a weird game to watch. Again, this defense is – I think everyone needs to appreciate what this defense is doing, because, they've been absolutely playing lights out, whether it's, Alfred Collins, Jahdae Barron. I mean, all these guys have just been – Colin Simmons with 2 sacks. I mean, these guys are just flying around. So, I think the defense will keep them in every game they're in. It's just about, taking advantage of the opportunities you have on offense, and, having that perfect game on offense that we haven't really fully seen yet, outside of maybe like the first half at Michigan, where, and there's other occasions, Florida, obviously they played really well as too, but, that I feel like it's that first drive, we saw it against Florida and they came back and we're fine against Florida, then saw it against Arkansas, gets sacked, and it just like messes up the whole offensive mojo. And then, they're trying to claw back the whole game. So it'll be interesting. Kentucky's a good defense. That'll be a good test. To get ready for Texas A&M. And It'll probably, it's Texas is what, a 20-point favorite. Yeah, like I wouldn't pick Texas to beat somebody. It's hard to like say they're going to outscore somebody by 20 points right now, just because I think the defense can hold them down, but can the offense outscore somebody by 20 plus points? We'll see.
Yeah. Hank, anything to watch? This week, any notable things at the top of your notebook before we let you go?
Yeah, I keeping a close eye on, we're going to have the visitors list this weekend for Kentucky. I think there's going to be, some big names coming in, obviously Fusi. There's a linebacker target named Nathaniel Owosu-Boateng. He's coming in from IMG Academy for an official visit. We'll see. I'll be curious to see if any other official visits get set. I don't think there will be. But I'd watch all that. The linebacker position is interesting. I think the guy to really watch there is Kellen Wiley, that recent offer they put out in Florida. He took an official visit for the Florida game. He's supposed to be at Miami this weekend for an official, and they're kind of thought to be the team to beat. But I think Texas has kind of turned the corner there and are in good shape for him. So I would watch out for Kellen Wiley.
What do you like about him?
He's just, he's kind of like, I would kind of compare him to kind of an Anthony Hill type, I guess. He's these like, it seems like Nansen really favors these kind of like length and speed. These like kind of not like huge bulky linebackers, but guys that can run and obviously have range. And he fits that. And he's really like, he's kind of gone under recruited. Like he's just starting to get noticed this year. So I think, obviously as a defensive player, kind of playing with a little bit of chip on your shoulder. But I've heard several college coaches say that this kid's like the real deal. His ranking doesn't show it right now, but he's definitely kind of like a diamond in the rough in terms of, getting found a little bit later. 6'4", 225, plays at pretty competitive high school, Armwood High School, which I think is where that's where Jerome Ford played, who was the running back for the Browns. There's several D1 guys that have come out of there, but big time player. So I think if you can finish your linebackers class with him, Bo Barnes, and Jonathan Cunningham, you're in pretty good shape. Watching him, obviously checking to see if Jamie French shows back up at Florida this weekend, or Myron Charles. We'll watch those two guys. Again, those guys are in Florida. They're the home state school. Florida's got money. So, it's worth keeping an eye on there. But beyond that, we'll go into next week before signing day. We're still on Michael Terry watch. I think at this point, it's like, he might as well just wait until December 4th now. I mean, like, have a ceremony at your school or something. I don't know. But I still think Texas is in good shape there. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. No imminent decisions that we know of, but keeping an eye on guys.
Yeah, the decision of Jamie. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
Go ahead. No, I got basketball one. Stick football.
The decision of Jamie French and Myron Charles, who are both from Florida, and Zalis Hicks, who's from Georgia, to all go to Florida at the same time. Does that make things a little more nervy? Or
I think just, this late in the process, anytime a guy's on another campus, it's nervy. Hicks, I think he's trying to just enjoy the recruiting process as much as he can. He just reclassified, so he hasn't really had the chance to do official visits, but he's going to be back at Texas this weekend. I think he's solid. I think he really loves Blake Gideon and, the way they've recruited him. So I don't foresee anything happening with Zalis Hicks. I don't want to say never with French or Charles. I think, both guys committed to Texas for a reason. I think they like Texas a lot. But again, kids can change their minds. Money talks too. I'm not saying, Texas doesn't have them set up as well. But, if Florida is really trying to make a big resurgence, for next year and really kind of set themselves up, a guy like Jamie French or Myron Charles would really help that. So we'll keep an eye on those guys. Not saying they're flipping, but certainly worth watching. And yeah, we'll see. And Texas has a home game this weekend. So, try to get everyone there that they can. Jamie French did say he wanted to come back for the Kentucky game. If he comes back for the Kentucky game, I think you're probably okay. If he shows back up at Florida, I'm probably going to think he's flipping. I've seen this happen a million times. So, Yeah, but other than that, we'll see who visits where the following weekend. I think we'll probably see probably some Texas commits go to the A&M game, maybe to watch Texas. I don't know, but I know Nick Thompson wants to. But beyond that, I think for the most part, the class is in pretty good shape. And this is also the time of the year where you start seeing just like outrageous like rumors pop up. Like yesterday, someone on Instagram, it was called like Inside the Ole Miss something. It wasn't a website; it's just an Instagram account. But they're saying KJ Lacey is getting set to decommit from Texas, and I guess Ole Miss is the favorite, or I forgot who they said was the favorite, but those are other situations you kind of have to look into. There's still quarterback dominoes out there still to fall. Ole Miss is trying to flip Deuce Knight from Auburn, the 5-star quarterback. If you see that happen, you would imagine Auburn would turn around and just tell KJ Lacey what will it take because they need a quarterback in the class. So I'm just putting out scenarios that could happen. But
Yeah,
KJ Lacey's
Auburn,
happy with Texas.
desperate.
Yeah. Auburn is getting desperate, and it's rinse and repeat with them. It's like they have terrible seasons. They band together in the offseason, pay a bunch of kids, get recruiting momentum, then suck again. And it's just rinse and repeat. But it looks like it's repeating again. They have Justice Terry coming in this weekend for an official visit. 5-star defensive lineman Texas would love to sign. He's going to go to Auburn for a visit. I would imagine they're going to throw whatever they can at him. But yeah, that's the era we live in.
Yeah. Well, and real quick, Bear Alexander, I mean, the guy, he's been here, there, everywhere. He stopped, playing at USC after 4 games to preserve his red shirt so he could transfer again. His snaps were kind of going down when he stopped playing. Is this a guy like I don't know what to make of Bear.
Yeah, Mike Roach actually wrote a story saying, Texas is a school to watch with him. I think it could depend on obviously you want to see who goes in the portal. And I think Texas has probably, they obviously have a huge behind the scenes staff, outside of just the coaching staff and everything, like guys that people have their ear to the ground. They know kind of what's happening where, but I think if you lose like a Myron Charles to Florida, I think that's a guy you probably are more open to taking just because you can't go another high school class where you only sign. Well, I mean, obviously he's portal, but you got to be able to sign multiple guys on that interior defensive line, and maybe they bring him in for a visit and kind of see where he's at, and see if it's a fit, see how he connects with Baker. But yeah, he's a guy that Texas has been circled. I think he was back watching the Georgia game this past weekend. I don't know, that's just a wild back and forth situation there. But yeah, I'll be curious to see. I think defensive line is somewhere Texas, I wouldn't be shocked to see them go 2-3 guys again like they did last year, depending on how the high school class finishes out. But, there's some positive buzz with Joseph Mbachu, the Grayson High School defensive lineman. So if you can get him, maybe they can, again, if they lose Myron Charles, and I keep like bringing up Myron Charles, but, maybe that opens up an opportunity to make a higher push for Justice Terry. So, Myron Charles is a guy I think, maybe one of the most important commits just from a standpoint of he's college ready now. Like he could come in and play next year if he needed to. So yeah, we'll see how this all unfolds.